Okay, what are plovers? So, we have horses being trained, racehorses being trained on beaches in Warrnambool, occurring regularly, and identified by the trainers as a strategy for training their horses. They're impacting upon the plovers. I wrote to the Minister and was told that this wasn't an action that could be addressed under the EPBC Act because they were individual instances and they weren't connected up in a series of actions. So I wanted to explore that as to sort of whether indeed that they are these actions are being considered as an action under the EPBC Act.
So Senator Monica Collins, I'm Assistant Secretary of the Compliance and Enforcement Branch. So I understand that the activity you're referring to is in the Belfast Reserve in Victoria.
Yes.
So primarily management of public land is a matter for the state government, in this case the Victorian government, and the Australian government has a role if there's a significant impact on matters of national environmental significance, which are identified under the Environment Protection and Biodiversity Conservation Act. So an individual action, as you've pointed out, can only be considered under the Act if it constitutes a significant impact. I do understand that the Threatened Species Commissioner has been engaging on this and has consulted with BirdLife Australia and Friends of the Hooded Plover, and has also engaged with the authorities to offer to assist. I understand that Parks Victoria is developing a plan of management for the Belfast Coastal Reserve and would be considering the management of the beach as part of that plan of management.
But with regard to the federal government's role and to whether the horse training is a significant action under the EPBC Act, and so that they would then have to be seeking approval of the federal government for that to continue, what's the current status of that?
So my understanding is if it was an organised activity, so for example one horse trainer undertaking routine horse training activities on the beach with a number of individuals, then you could look at it as an individual and then assess the cumulative impact. But if it's not being coordinated or undertaken by a single operator at any level, then it is seen as individual actions, and the EPBC Act is triggered when an action is having a significant impact on a species.
So in terms of it being organised, so you've got trainers that are regularly training their horses there on a regular basis, more than one horse. So is that enough for it to be a significant action?
Senator, I think what Ms. Collins is talking about, though, is you need under the Act, you need a proponent. You need someone to say, all right, I've organised these 7 different trainers to come and train their horses, and I'm accountable and therefore would be subject to the Act, if I've understood
That's
correctly.
right,
So you need to have more than one trainer, you're saying?
But organised and run. So if you had a company that was running a business that they had 7 different trainers operating on a company, on the beach, then you would say, yes, that company owner, that's the proponent for this action and could be assessed.
But if you just had one trainer that was undertaking a series of horse training activities,
That's
and
right.
which were the equivalent, of many horses on the beach,
That's right.
surely that would be sufficient to be a series of connected activities to be a significant action.
Senator James Jugurtha, Assistant Secretary Policy and Reform. You're absolutely right. Each individual trainer is obligated under the EPBC Act to assess their own activity as to whether or not it constitutes a significant impact under the EPBC Act, and we provide significant impact guidelines to assist people to make that self-assessment, and we have a compliance and enforcement function that looks at individual instances where they are referred to us, but it's each entity undertaking their own action needs to consider whether or not they are having a significant impact undertaking the particular activity they are doing. It doesn't consider everything else that is going on. Each individual instance needs to be considered by each proponent, if you like.
So have these horse trainers have they done that self-assessment?
I'm unaware of whether or not there's an obligation under Commonwealth law for
And-
those self-assessments to
And
be...
what if the department is made aware of the fact that there is a strong case that they should be doing that self-assessment and that hasn't occurred?
Senator, so the practical way is if you have lots of trainers, how do you get a picture of what's happening overall? What we will look to do is talk to Parks Victoria, because in doing their proposed management plan, they should be standing back and looking at what's happening on that reserve, and we might have a strategic engagement with Parks Victoria to see about what's their approach for managing that reserve and what's that implications for our actions.
But would Parks Victoria do an assessment for you? Is their view as to whether there was a significant action that was occurring because of and that there should be an assessment? There should be an assessment being undertaken.
So what I would be looking for from Parks Victoria is, if they're looking to do a management plan, is look at what information they're taking into consideration. We would have a look at the material coming from the Friends of the Hooded Plover and what the Threatened Species Commissioner, and stand back and look at that holistically and say, okay, what does that implication mean for the EPBC Act? So I'm hoping that there'll be some good information from Parks Victoria, but we'd like to stand back and see what information's at hand, and particularly when you've got Parks Victoria who manage that reserve and you've got a range of local communities, let's bring that information to the surface and then have a look at what that means from the implication for EPBC Act.
So can I clarify, you have already requested Parks Victoria?
No, we haven't sent it, not to my knowledge, but I will
but you are committing
I'll undertake to have an engagement with Parks Victoria to see what information's at hand, and see if we can find a sensible way for us to be able to manage what that means for a species that we protect.
Would you be able to give me an idea of a timeline that engagement could
No, I
occur
have to take
under?
that on notice, Senator, but I will give an undertaking to contact them this week.
Okay, thank you. In particular, I mean, I understand that there was a recent federal court decision in the Tasmanian Aboriginal Centre versus the Secretary, Department of Primary Industries, Parks, Water and Environment, which reaffirmed the meaning of an action to include a connected series of smaller activities or instances of conduct that form a greater whole. So it seems to me that there is a very strong case that these smaller activities forming a greater whole would be an action that would need to be assessed under the EPBC
And I think
Act.
the case you refer to, Senator, again, the benefit of that is there is a level of government involved in pulling together that picture, which makes it more practical for us to stand back and say, well, what is the Tasmanian government looking at there? And we can do a similar engagement with the Victorian government and try to understand what they know about what's their intent about managing and what's the implications for a species we protect, and what's the most practical way for us to apply the EPBC Act.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much.